The conference room smelled like Taurus La Mer moisturizer and Chase's cheap Axe body spray. I kept my eyes on the logic board schematic spread across the table, tuning out the ambient hum of the HVAC until the word termination sliced through the bullshit. "You're done, Ethan," Tori said. She wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was locked on Chase Donovan, who was leaning against the floor-to-ceiling glass, bouncing a stress ball shaped like the Bitcoin logo. Effective immediately. I finally looked up. My wife of 4 years, Victoria Tori Cole, CEO of Cole Tetcher, CEO of the company ID built while she schmoozed VCs in Rosewood, Sand Hill, had just signed the paperwork on our divorce and my professional execution. But this wasn't about a marriage. It was about the architecture. Walk me through the logic. Tori, I said, keeping my voice flat. Atlas isn't just a database. It's the foundation. If you rip out the foundation, the house doesn't stand. It collapses under its own weight. Chase let out a wet, nasally laugh. Logic? That's your problem. Man, you're buried in the weeds. We're talking Series B here. Momentum, market share. Your security protocols are a bottleneck. We need to pivot. Move fast. Break things. Zuckerberg style. There are no things to break if there's no security. Chase, I replied, leaning back in my chair. My fingers itched for the keyboard, but I kept them still. What you're calling moving fast is actually just gross negligence. You want to launch Atlas without handshake encryption? That's not a product. It's a class action lawsuit waiting to happen. One breach, and we're looking at GDPR fines that'll sink us before Q3. Tori sighed, a dramatic, practiced sound. She flipped her chestnut hair over her shoulder, looking at me with that nerdinga look, the one she used when she thought I was being a petulant child. Ethan, you're obsessed with perfection. The market doesn't reward perfection. It rewards presence. Chase has a soft commitment from Sequoia Vertex, but they need a functional prototype by Monday. Your code is cumbersome. Cumbersome? I repeated. 3 years. 17 million lines of optimized C++ and Python. Every byte allocated with purpose. You mean stable? Redundant? Or are you just pissed that I want cut corners so you can impress your boy toy here? Chase pushed off the glass wall. He sauntered over, putting a hand on Tora's shoulder in a way that was clearly meant to provoke me. It worked, but not in the way he expected. I felt a cold detachment settle over me, like I was looking at a corrupted file. Taurus, right? You're a liability. Man, a stick in the mud. So, pack your shit. Security's waiting outside. He reached for my laptop. Big mistake. My hand shot out, faster than his frat boy reflexes could track, clamping down on his wrist. "Don't," I said quietly, my grip tightening. "Touch my hardware, and it'll have you up on federal charges for IP theft before you can spell embezzlement." I stood up, slowly disconnecting my personal Drivia matte black SSD no bigger than a matchbox, encrypted with a 4096-bit RSA key. Tori, you're making a catastrophic error in judgment. Without me, Atlas is just a pretty UI skin. The core algorithms, the latency solutions, the fail-safes that exist only in my head and on this drive. Your engineering team doesn't have the technical depth to reverse engineer it in 6 months. Let alone 6 days. You're trying to fly a fighter jet after watching a YouTube tutorial. She finally met my eyes. For a split second, I saw a flicker of uncertainty. It vanished, buried under a layer of ice and arrogance. We have Chase. He understands the vision. We don't need your technicalities. You've always been so rigid. Ethan, it's why we're getting a divorce. Consider this your severance. Divorce. There it was. The real punchline, not the company. Us. I nodded, slipping the drive into the inner pocket of my blazer. Fine, but when your pivot crashes and burns because you ignored the immutable laws of data integrity, remember this moment. Remember that you chose a guy who thinks bandwidth is a buzzword over the man who made sure your servers didn't melt down. I turned to the 2 security guards hovering by the door mic and Dave, 2 guys ID personally vetted and hired last year. Stand down. Guys, it'll walk out. But if you touch my personal effects, You're complicit in corporate espionage. Think about that when you're updating your resumes. They step back, avoiding my gaze. Smart men. As I walked past Chase, I stopped. Enjoy the code base. Chase, try not to cry when you realize the admin privileges are locked behind a biometric key that only responds to my retina. And the root password? It's not password 123. It's a hash of my DNA sequence. Good luck brute forcing that. Walking out of the glass doors of our Palo Alto headquarters for the last time, I didn't feel the rage I expected. I felt clarity. A cold, crystalline focus. They wanted a world without my rules. I'd give them a masterclass in systemic failure. I pulled out my phone and scrolled past tourist missed calls and texts. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It picked up on the second ring. Cole, my father's voice barked. Arthur Cole, old school, built his first semiconductor company with a soldering iron and a grudge. Dad, it's Ethan. Kid, what's wrong? You never call unless the grid's down. The grid's about to go down. I said, hitting the crosswalk button on Emerson Street. Tori fired me. She's installing her VC lapdog to run Atlas. They're going to strip the security protocols to chase a Series B. Silence on the other end. Then a low chuckle. About damn time. I told you marrying that gold digger was a depreciating asset. What do you need? Access to the Blackwood Fund. All of it. I need to buy back my patents and acquire the outstanding shares before the bell opens tomorrow. You've got it. I'll wire the seed money tonight. But Ethan, don't just fire her. Make her understand the cost of fucking with coal. Burn the fields. I'm not going to burn the fields. Dad, I said, watching the Tesla traffic glide by. I'm going to salt the earth. Send me the access codes. I hung up. The game had changed. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a landlord, and their lease was about to expire. I looked back at the glass tower, seeing the reflection of the California sun on the windows. It looked like a server farm on fire. I walked to my car, a nondescript Audi S6 Practical, fast, and built for performance, not show. I slid into the driver's seat and opened my encrypted messaging app. I sent a single text to Sarah, my lead DevOps engineer, who was still inside. Ethan, they're going to ask you to disable the watchdog timers. Don't do it. Keep a log of every request Chase makes. I'll need it for the injunction. Her reply came seconds later. Sarah, already on it. They're clueless. Ethan, Chase tried to optimize the SQL queries by deleting the foreign keys. I had to stop him from nuking the staging environment. What's the play? I smiled, a rare, cold expression. Ethan, the play is patience. Let them dig their own graves. I'll be in touch. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and pulled into traffic. The sun was setting over the Santa Cruz Mountains, casting long shadows over Sand Hill Road. Somewhere in those shadows, Chase and Tori were celebrating their coup. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd cut the head off the snake. They didn't realize the snake was a hydra, and I was about to grow some teeth. I drove in silence, the hum of the electric engine, the only sound. My mind was already racing ahead, mapping out the acquisition strategy, the legal maneuvers, the technical countermeasures. I thought about the night I met Tori at a Stanford networking event. She was charming, ambitious, hungry. I thought we were building something together. I was wrong. She was just using my blueprint to build a stage for herself. Well, the stage was about to collapse, and I'd be there to watch the fall. I pulled into the driveway of the modest townhouse ID rented in Menlo Park. It was temporary, a holding pattern. I grabbed my laptop bag and walked inside. No more la mersmel. No more Chase. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the glowing LED of my router. I booted up my personal Riga custom-built Threadripper workstation that cost more than most people's cars. I opened a terminal window and began scripting. I wasn't hacking cold tech. I didn't need to. I was building a new fortress, one with higher walls and a moat filled with sharks. As I worked, I thought about the conversation I'd have with Tori in a few days. Shed call, probably crying, definitely confused. Shed asked how I did it. ID, tell her the truth. I didn't do it to her. I did it for me, for the integrity of the work, for the respect of the craft. But she wouldn't understand. She had never understood that the value wasn't in the pitch deck or the valuation. It was in the code, the clean, unbreakable, elegant code. I hit enter, executing the first phase of my plan. The screen filled with green text, scrolling rapidly. A digital manifesto. Somewhere in Palo Alto, a phone would ring. A CEO would get some very bad news. And a husband would finally get his piece. I leaned back, cracking my knuckles. The silent kill was complete. Now, the real work began. I didn't sleep. Sleep is a luxury for people who aren't currently in the middle of a hostile takeover. At 3:17 a.m., my burner lit up. Sarah. I swiped to answer, keeping my voice low. Talk. Dude, she whispered, the tension in her voice vibrating through the receiver. It's a goddamn circus here. Chase is trying to optimize the query language. He just deleted the deadlock prevention module. Tora's screaming about the Sequoia Vertex demo tomorrow. We're dropping packets like they're hot. I pulled up the remote monitoring dashboard on my second monitor. Red flags everywhere. Latency was spiking into the red. Let them, I said, my fingers already flying across the keyboard. How's the memory leak situation? Catastrophic. Chase insists on using his cloud-native microservice architecture. It's a fragmented mess. Also, Tora's flashing a new rock. Must be from Mr. VC Moneybags. Looks like a carbon copy of the one you gave her on your anniversary. I paused. A cold smile touched my lips. Interesting. Let her have the ring. It'll take the kingdom. I opened a terminal window. I still had backdoor access, not because I was a thief, but because ID built the damn system from the kernel up. ID left a few Easter eggs. Subroutines that would only activate under specific environmental triggers. Triggers like, say, an unauthorized user with level 1 clearance attempting to bypass the core authentication protocol. I watched the access log scroll. There it was. Chat signature. Chase_Donovan_admin. He was trying to force deploy a patch to the production environment at 3:20 a.m. Idiot. I scripted a quick response. It wasn't a hack. It was a lesson in computational physics. I rerouted the primary data ingestion pipeline through a recursive loop of digital Ouroboros. The system would start eating its own tail, consuming CPU cycles and RAM exponentially. Sarah, I said into the phone, in about 30 seconds. The main cluster is going to start throwing out-of-memory exceptions. Tell the on-call team to stop rebooting the nodes. ITLL only make it worse. How the hell do you know that? Because I wrote the OS. Just watch. I hung up and refreshed the server status page. Sure enough, the load average graph looked like a hockey stick. Within 2 minutes, the internal Slack channels were blowing up. I had a filtered feed open, watching the panic unfold in real time. Chase_Donovan frowny face 3:24 a.m. Why is the Kubernetes cluster crashing? Someone restart the master node. Sarah_DevOps frowny face 3:25 a.m. Restarting won't help. Chase, we're in a kernel panic. The OM killer is going berserk. J_Johnson_engineer frowny face 3:26 a.m. Is it a DDoS? Are we under attack? Chase_Donovan frowny face 3:27 a.m. It's sabotage. It has to be Ethan. Torai, we need to call the FBI. My phone buzzed again. Tora's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before picking up. Ethan, her voice was sharp, frayed at the edges. The polished CEO veneer completely gone. What did you do to the servers? I did nothing. Torai, I said calmly, watching a pie chart of resource allocation turn entirely red. But your visionary team is currently trying to run a marathon in shoes I specifically told them were 2 sizes too small. You're experiencing a resource starvation issue caused by a runaway process. Specifically, a process initiated by your new golden boy. This is sabotage if this demo fails. We lose everything. Sequoia Vertex will walk. Everything you didn't build. You mean? I corrected. Look, I'm not interested in your operational meltdowns. But if you want a hint, tell your boy toy to stop treating a multi-threaded, Pneumo-aware architecture, like a single-core Commodore 64. He's causing a race condition that would make a computer science 101 professor weep into his chalk dust. He says you build a kill switch. He says you booby-trapped the entire system. I built safeguards. Torai, I said, my voice dropping to a colder pitch. You're the one who turned them into kill switches by firing the only person who knew how to disarm them, and then letting an amateur poke at the internals. Hey, race a freebie. The system is currently prioritizing I/O requests based on a deprecated timestamp flag. Fix that, and maybe you'll get 5 minutes of uptime before the garbage collector chokes again. I hung up before she could respond. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I already knew what was happening at HQ. Chase would be sweating through his Patagonia vest. Torai would be refreshing the AWS billing dashboard in horror as the cost skyrocketed, and the engineers would be staring at stacked traces they couldn't decipher. I spent the next hour refining the scripts. I wasn't just crashing their servers. I was teaching them. I planted logic bombs in the deployment pipeline that would trigger if they tried to roll back to any version older than the one ID approved. I altered the logging framework so that every error message would include a snippet of my personal manifesto. Architecture is destiny. By 7 a.m., the tech blogs were starting to whisper. Unconfirmed reports of instability at Coltech. Is the Atlas engine stalling? My burner buzz again. A text from Sarah. Sarah, you're a ghost. Systems back up. But Chase is losing his mind. He's blaming you for malicious compliance. Taurus buying it. Legal just sent a cease and desist to your apartment. They're lawyering up. I smirked. Malicious compliance. I like that. I typed back. Ethan, let them sue. My legal team funded by the Blackwood Fund is already drafting a countersuit for IP theft and gross negligence. They'll be served by noon. How's the morale? Sarah, lower than a snake's belly. Half the dev team is updating their LinkedIn profiles. Chase just tried to blame the outage on solar flares. Taurus not correcting him. Also, FYI, they're trying to clone the repo from the backup tapes. Thought you want to know. I froze. Backup tapes. I hadn't accounted for that. It was a low-level move, but Chase might be desperate enough to try it. I pulled up the archival logs. Sure enough, there was an attempt to mount the secondary tape library. ID encrypted those backups with a quantum-resistant lattice cipher tied to my personal biometric token, without my retina or my private key. Those tapes were just plastic bricks, but I couldn't let them know that yet. I needed them to waste time and resources on the futile effort. I crafted a simple script that would simulate a successful mount but feed them corrupted data-randomized strings of characters that looked like code but would cause a syntax error on every compile. It was the digital equivalent of feeding them sawdust. I sent a quick text to Sarah. Ethan, let them have the backups. Monitor the compile errors. I want to know exactly when they realize they wasted 6 hours. I switched over to my email and finished drafting a message to every major tech publication in the Valley. The subject line was simple: the impending collapse of Coltech, a technical postmortem. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I laid out the technical failures in excruciating detail: the lack of input sanitization, the absence of proper exception handling, the catastrophic decision to remove the transaction rollback features. I painted a picture of a company flying blind, piloted by people who didn't understand the machinery. I attached a white paper ID written 3 months ago, warning Tori about these exact vulnerabilities. Shed rejected it, calling it pessimistic. Now, it was Exhibit A. I hit send to the contacts at TechCrunch. The information, and wired, the echo chamber of Silicon Valley would do the rest. By lunchtime, the narrative would shift. Coltech wouldn't be a rising star. It would be a cautionary tale. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. Ethan Cole? A crisp, male voice. Marcus Valley. Sequoia Vertex. We have a meeting scheduled with Ms. Cole tomorrow morning regarding the Atlas platform. The meeting is canceled. Marcus. I said. Or at least, it should be. Have you checked your inbox? I just sent your analyst a technical brief. A pause. I'm looking at it now. This is quite detailed. You're claiming the current Atlas build is fundamentally unstable? am claiming that the current management team has stripped out the stability protocols. If you invest in their current trajectory, you're not buying a tech company, you're buying a legal liability. I'd be happy to discuss a recapitalization plan that involves actual engineers, not just PowerPoint jockeys. Another pause, longer this time. We value technical integrity. Mr. Cole, very much so. Let me circulate this with the partners. Expect a call from our legal counsel. Looking forward to it. I hung up. The first domino had fallen. Sequoia Vertex was spooked. Once one firm got cold feet, the others would follow. Taurus House of Cards was about to meet a stiff breeze. I looked at the clock. 8:45 a.m. Time for breakfast. I walked into the kitchen, poured a black coffee, and watched the sun rise over the bay. Somewhere across town, Tori was realizing that her empire was built on sand, and Chase was realizing that his vision was just a screensaver. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, perfect. My phone buzzed one last time before I silenced it for the morning. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Probably a burner. Unknown. Ethan, please, talk to me. It's Tori. I know you're behind this. Just tell me what you want. Name your price. I looked at the message. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing. I typed a single word reply and hit send. Ethan, integrity. I powered down the burner and slid it into a drawer. The ghost was in the machine, and the machine was grinding to a halt. Let them beg. Let them plead. I wasn't interested in their apologies. I was interested in their surrender. I opened my primary laptop and started coding the next phase of the acquisition. The silence in the townhouse was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic clicking of the keys. It was the sound of a man rebuilding his world, one line of code at a time. And in the distance, I could almost hear the first cracks forming in the glass tower of Coltech. Monday, 8:47 a.m., the Four Seasons in Palo Alto. I was in the lobby, black coffee in hand, watching the VC associates hustle toward the private dining rooms. The air smelled like money and desperation. My phone buzzed. Sarah, they're panicking. She whispered. Chase just tried to deploy a hotfix that broke the staging environment entirely. Taurus screaming at legal. The Sequoia guys are already here. Marcus Vale is asking where the technical lead is. Keep them warm. Sarah, am walking in now. I didn't wait for a reply. I crossed the lobby. Nodding to the hostess, she knew me. Knew I wasn't a walk-in. I pushed open the heavy mahogany doors to the private dining suite. 12 pairs of eyes snapped at me. Marcus Vale, from Sequoia Vertex. Raised an eyebrow. Tori was mid-sentence. Her face frozen in a mask of corporate poise that shattered the second she saw me. Ethan, her voice pitched high. The sound of a woman whose world just tilted. What the hell are you doing here? You're trespassing. Security. A suit by the door stepped forward, but Marcus Vale held up a hand. Hold on. Mr. Cole, this is a private meeting. Not anymore. Marcus, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I pulled out a manila envelope, sealed, and tossed it onto the walnut table. It landed with a satisfying thud. That's a notice of foreclosure and a change of control filing, effective at 9 a.m. this morning. Blackwood Ventures Me Families Fund exercises its call option on the outstanding senior secured notes of Coltech. Chase, standing beside Tori with a coffee stain on his J. Crew tie, let out a strangled laugh. Are you kidding me? This is a joke. Esa disgrante del ex-employee. Tori, call the cops. Shut up. Chase, Marcus said, his tone icy. He picked up the envelope, scanning the first page. His eyes narrowed. This appears to be legitimate. The loan documents are airtight. It says here that Blackwood now holds a 51% equity stake due to the covenant breach triggered by the unauthorized alteration of core IP and the wrongful termination of the chief architect. Taurus' face drained of color. She reached for the paper, her manicured nails trembling. That's impossible. I never signed off on a 51% transfer. In the CEO, I have board approval. You had board approval because I let you have it. I interrupted. stepping closer. 2 years ago, when we were struggling to close the seed round, I collateralized my personal patents and IP portfolio to secure a bridge loan. You were so busy playing CEO in front of the mirrors that you forgot to read the fine print. The loan wasn't just debt. Tori, it was convertible preferred stock with full voting rights. And the board? My dad's the chairman emeritus. He never really stepped down. I looked around the table. The other Veeks guy from Benchmark and Kleiner were already pulling out their phones, texting their partners. The mood shifted from confusion to calculation in 3 seconds flat. These guys didn't care about drama. They cared about downside protection. And I was the only one in the room who could stop the bleeding. Mr. Cole, Marcus said slowly, are you telling us that you've been the majority shareholder this entire time? I'm telling you that I've been the only adult in the room. I said, while Chase here was busy, pivoting us into bankruptcy. I was ensuring the company's technical debt didn't exceed its market cap. The demo you're about to see is a fraud. It's running on a corrupted build that'll crash before you finish your mimosas. Chase stepped forward, jabbing a finger at me. He's bluffing. He's a sore loser. Tori, don't listen to him. We can fight this. My uncle's a partner at Wilson Sonsini. Your uncle can't save you from a balance sheet. Chase, I said, turning my gaze on him. And he definitely can't explain to the SEC why you try to deploy untested code to a production environment containing sensitive user data. I've already sent the audit logs to the FTC. You're looking at a civil investigation. Minimum, possibly criminal, depending on how deep the malfeasance goes. The blood drained from Chase's face. He looked at Tori, then at the VCs, then back at me. You set me up. I set the system up. Chase, you're the one who tripped the wires. I said. I turned back to Marcus. Gentlemen, the pitch is off. Coltech is undergoing a hostile acquisition. If you want to invest in a company with a solid technical foundation and a management team that isn't currently committing securities fraud, my office will be open tomorrow. If not, I suggest you steer clear of anyone who thinks synergy is a technical term. I started to walk out. ID made my point. The silence behind me was deafening until Tori found her voice. Ethan, wait. She scrambled around the table, grabbing my arm. Her nails dug into my suit jacket. Please, just talk to me. We can fix this. We can redo the cap table. I'll step down as CEO. I'll be your VP of strategy. Just don't do this. Don't throw me out like this. I looked down at her hand on my arm. I peeled her fingers back, one by one, with the detached precision of a man debugging a faulty module. You're not sorry you did it. Tori, you're sorry it didn't work. You're not begging for forgiveness. You're begging for a paycheck. There's a difference. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a check. ID had it prepared since Saturday. I held it out to her. This is your severance. It's more than you deserve, but it's less than you think you're owed. Sign the NDA. Accept the payment. And you walk away with your reputation what's left of intact. Refuse, and he'll sue you for every penny you've misappropriated and ensure your name is mud in every VC circle from here to Dubai. She stared at the check. Her lip quivered. You're a monster. No, I said, I'm the architect, and you're just a deprecated dependency. Remove the dependency, and the system stabilizes. I looked at Chase, who was still rooted to the spot, pale and sweating. One more thing. Chase, the code you've been tinkering with, I activated the final protocol this morning at 8:55, in about 3 minutes. It's going to wipe every unsensed change you've made in the last 72 hours. All your innovations, gone. Hope you backed up your vision on a USB drive. I didn't wait for the fallout. I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving a room full of stunned investors and a shattered couple. As I passed the hostess stand, I heard the first muffled shriek from Tori and the distinct sound of a chair scraping back. Marcus Vale was already on his cell phone, likely calling his partners to discuss a new deal with Atlas Systems. I stepped out into the Palo Alto sunlight. It was 9:03 a.m., right on schedule. My phone buzzed. Sarah. Holy shit. Ethan, did you just? I just did. How's the build? It's reverting. The whole UI just rolled back to the pre-chase version. Everything's stable. Like, boringly stable. How did you? I didn't. The system did. I just reminded it who the admin was. Start scheduling interviews with the dev team. Anyone who stayed silent while Chase was getting the code base gets a pink slip. I want a new org chart on my desk by noon. You got it, boss. Welcome back. I ended the call and slid the phone into my pocket. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calibrated. The system was running as intended. The noise had been filtered out, and the signal was clear. Across the street, I saw Tori burst out of the hotel doors, Chase trailing behind her like a lost puppy. She was crying, mascara running, the expensive diamond on her finger catching the light. She saw me, hesitated, then started toward me, her mouth opening to scream something. I turned my back on her and walked to my car. The engine purred to life. As I pulled away, I caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror standing on the curb, alone, as the world shed tried to steel crumbled around her. The ghost had left the machine. The owner had returned, and the rebuild was already underway. Tuesday, 9:12 a.m., Coal Tech headquarters. I walked into the main glass doors without a badge. Didn't need one. Mike and Dave, the security guys from yesterday, nodded at me, no smirks. Just professional deference. Word traveled fast in the valley, especially the kind of word that involved a majority stake and a terminated CEO. I bypassed the elevators and took the stairs to the third floor. Engineering. Sarah was waiting by the glass partition, a tablet in her hand. Behind her, the open plan office was a morgue. No music, no chatter, just a hum of overclocked CPUs and the occasional click of a nervous mouse. Boss, she said, falling into step beside me. Morales in the basement. Half the marketing team is updating their LinkedIn profiles as we speak. Legal's lawyered up, and Chazzy no sign of him since the hotel. Rumor is he caught a red-eye to Austin. Good riddance, I said, not breaking stride. I headed straight for the server room. The door was propped open. Inside, the racks were humming peacefully. The diagnostic LEDs a steady, reassuring green. No alarms, no smoke. Status report. Core Atlas engine is stable. The rollback you triggered wiped 12% of the non-critical UI elements Chase's team butchered. No data loss. Backups are solid. But we've got a problem with the engineering leads. Ramirez and Chene were signing off on Chase's optimizations to stay in Tor's good graces. Ramirez actually tried to disable the watchdog timer yesterday afternoon. I stopped, turning to look at her. He what? Said it was blocking the deployment pipeline. I stopped him, but he's been vocal in the group chat about moving past Ethan's paranoia. Paranoia, I repeated, tasting the word. I pulled out my phone and texted the head of HR, a woman named Donna ID retained from the old guard. Ethan, escort Ramirez and Chin out of the building. Revoke all credentials. Effective immediately. Schedule interviews for every engineer on the floor. If they stayed silent while the code base was being gutted, they're not a cultural fit. I don't pay for compliance. I pay for conviction. Sarah nodded, tapping away on her tablet. On it, also, Taurus in her office. She's been there since 7 a.m., packing boxes. She's not taking it well. She's not supposed to take it well. I said, turning toward the corner office. The blinds were drawn. I pushed the door open without knocking. Tori was sitting on a cardboard box, surrounded by framed photos and a wilted orchid. She had traded the power suit for a cashmere wrap, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. The diamond on her finger was gone. Probably pawned it for legal fees. Ethan, she whispered, please, just talk to me. I closed the door, shutting out the muffled sound of the office. Seat. I stood over her, my hands in my pockets, my expression neutral. You want to talk about value. Tori, let's talk about value. You valued a man who couldn't tell a kernel from a cashew over the infrastructure that paid for your Porsche. You valued momentum over integrity. And you valued your ego over your marriage. I was scared. Ethan, she cried, her voice cracking. She stood up, swaying slightly. Chase promised me the world. He said we could be the next unicorn if we just moved faster. You were so stubborn, so obsessed with your perfect little code that you couldn't see the bigger picture. The bigger picture. I said, my voice cold and steady. Is that without the perfect little code, there is no picture. There's just a blank canvas and a bunch of idiots claiming they're artists. You didn't want a partner. Tori, you wanted a prop. Someone to build the stage while you took the bows. She took a step toward me, her hands twisting in the fabric of her wrap. I'll do anything. Demote me. I'll be your VP. I'll beg the board. I'll apologize to every engineer in this building. Just don't throw me out like this. This company is my life. It was never your life. I corrected. It was mine. You were just leasing space in it, and you violated the terms of the lease. I pulled the check from my pocket, the same one from yesterday, and placed it on the edge of her mahogany desk. This is your severance. It's more than you deserve, but it's less than you think you're owed. Take it, sign the NDA, and disappear. She stared at the check like it was a venomous snake. You're destroying me, impruning a dead branch. I said, there's a difference. You're not sorry you did it. Tori, you're sorry it didn't work. You're not begging for forgiveness. You're begging for a paycheck. If I let you stay, you'll spend the next 5 years undermining me, leaking to the press, and sabotaging projects to prove you were right. I don't have time for that. You're a monster, she whispered, the venom returning to her voice. You always were. Cold, calculating. You don't care about people, only your precious systems. Systems are predictable. I said, people like you are not, and in a world built on code, predictability is the only currency that matters. I turned toward the door, signed the papers. Tori, by noon, if I don't have your resignation and the executed NDA on my desk by then, I'll file the civil suit early, and I'll make sure every VC in California knows exactly why you were fired. Good luck pivoting your way out of that. I walked out, leaving her in the wreckage of her own ambition as I passed Sarah's desk. She looked up. Done? Done. Get Donna in here. I want those NDAs signed and notarized before lunch. And get me a list of every vendor Tori personally contracted. I want to audit every invoice. Already on it, she said, sliding a folder across the desk. Also, Mark Andreessen's assistant called. He wants a one-on-one next week. Thinks Atlas is the real deal now that the noise is gone. Tell him he'll do it over coffee. No decks, no slides, just a math. I took the folder and headed for the elevator. As the door slid shut, I caught a glimpse of Tori through the glass wall of her office. She was staring at the check, her shoulders shaking, not crying, shaking with a hatred that was almost comforting. It was honest, at least. Back in my new office, formerly the boardroom. Now, mine eyes sat down at the head of the table. Sarah followed, closing the door. What's next? Next, we rebuild. I said, opening the folder. We hire engineers who understand that move fast and break things is a suicide pact, not a motto. We open source the Atlas framework, but keep the optimization layers proprietary. And we make sure every line of code has my signature on it. Literally. And Tori? Tori is a deprecated module. I said, looking at the quarterly projections, she'll find another startup to infest, another fool to marry, but she'll never touch anything I build again. And when she sees Atlas on every screen in the valley, she'll remember this moment. She'll remember that she chose a shortcut and lost a highway. Sarah nodded. Cold. Boss. But fair. Fairness is a human construct. I said, powering up my terminal. Stability is a mathematical one. And in this system, stability wins. I spent the next 4 hours in back-to-back calls legal. HR, Mark Vale from Sequoia, and a few key engineers I trusted. By 2 p.m., the NDA and resignation were on my desk. Tori's signature was a jagged scrawl, but it was binding. Donna confirmed the funds had cleared. It was over. I stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot. Tori was walking to her car. A U-Haul trailer hitched to the back. She didn't look up. She got in and drove away without a backward glance. Sarah appeared in the doorway. She's gone. Good, I said, turning back to the monitors. Now we can get back to work. The screen glowed with lines of code, each one a brick in the foundation of something permanent, something real. I started typing. The rhythm of the keys a steady heartbeat. The ghost was gone. The architect was home. And the building was just beginning. 6 months later. San Jose Convention Center. I stood in the wings of the main stage, listening to the murmur of 8,000 attendees. The house lights dimmed. Sarah appeared at my elbow, handing me the wireless mic. 2 minutes. Ethan, Andreessen's in the front row. Sequoia's whole partnership is here. Even some guys from DARPA. Any sign of Tori? I asked, more out of habit than concern. Negative. Last I heard, she was consulting for some crypto startup in Miami, calling herself a turnaround specialist now. Sarah smirked. No one's returning her calls. Good, I said. The stage manager cued me. I walked out. The applause was polite at first, then built as people recognized the face from the TechCrunch headlines. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I set the mic clip on my lapel, adjusted it, and looked out at the ocean of screens and faces. In software, I started, my voice cutting through the silence without needing a shout. We often confuse activity with progress. We celebrate the pivot. We worship the move fast and break things mentality. But true innovation isn't about breaking things. It's about building things that cannot be broken. Resilience isn't a feature you bolt on at the end. It's the foundation. I didn't talk about the divorce. I didn't mention Chase or the sabotage. I talked about latency, about atomic commits, about the elegance of a system that didn't need a human to hold its hand. I talked about the open sourcing of the Atlas framework and how it would reduce critical security vulnerabilities by 94% in 6 months. When I finished, the applause was genuine, not because I was a showman, but because the numbers didn't lie. As I stepped off stage, the crowd surged. VCs, engineers, reporters, they all wanted a piece. I navigated the gauntlet with Sarah fielding most of the requests. Then I saw her, leaning against a pillar near the exit, half hidden in the shadows. Tori, she looked ordinary. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by an off-the-rack blazer. The confidence was a thin veneer over a brittle core. I excused myself from a group of Kleiner partners and walked over. A few people noticed, their conversations dipping into hushed whispers. Tori, I said, my tone neutral. You shouldn't be here. This is a ticketed event. I wanted to see, she said, her voice barely audible over the convention hall noise. She didn't look at me. She looked at the stage, where a junior engineer from my team was now demoing a real-time data visualization. You did it. Ethan, you actually did it. Without me. There is no without me. Tori, I corrected. There's despite you. That's the difference. You see the success and think you missed out. But you didn't. You were the bug in the system. Removing you is what allowed the optimization to occur. She flinched. Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were hollow. Do you ever think about us? About what we had? Before the company? Before everything? I think about the code, I said, glancing at my watch. I had a board dinner in 40 minutes. I think about the architecture. Our marriage was a poorly written function that looked good on the surface, but it had a memory leak that eventually crashed the whole program. I debugged my life. Tori, I reallocated the resources. You're just a deprecated module now. I'm sorry, she whispered. It sounded like it was dragged out of her. I'm so sorry. Ethan, you're not sorry you did it, I said, meeting her gaze. You're sorry it didn't work. There's a difference. And that difference is why you'll never build anything of value. You still think success is a matter of luck or charm or who you know. It's not. It's math. It's discipline. It's a refusal to cut corners. I pulled out a business card, not mine, but one ID grabbed from a recruiter earlier. I held it out. She looked at it like it was a poison pill. Chase is looking for a co-founder for his new disruptive dog walking app in Austin. I said, blockchain-based. Naturally, maybe you can pivot your way to success there. Although, frankly, it's irrelevant to me. She didn't take the card. It fluttered to the floor between us. You're a Cole man. Ethan Cole, a precise man. Victoria. I said, there's a difference, and precision leaves no room for parasites. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back over my shoulder. One last thing. Stop telling people you co-founded Atlas. The SEC frowns on that kind of revisionist history, and my legal team has a long memory. Consider this your final warning. I walked away, not waiting for a response. I didn't need the last word. ID already written the final line of code. Sarah fell into step beside me as we exited the hall into the cool evening air. Harsh. Boss, she said. Accurate. I corrected. We walked to the waiting town car. What's the status on the Series C? Oversubscribed. We're looking at a $12 billion valuation. Andreessen wants the lead. He says you've restored sanity to the valley. Sanity is just a side effect of good engineering. I said, sliding into the back seat. The car pulled away from the curb. I looked out the window at the city lights, each one a node in a vast, interconnected network. Call Donna. Tell her to start the background checks on the new hires. I want zero tolerance for hustle culture types. And get me the latest latency reports from the Dublin data center. If it's over 10 milliseconds. I want to know why. Yes, sir, Sarah said, tapping away on her phone. I leaned back against the leather, closing my eyes for a moment. The silence in the car was profound. No perfume, no desperate pitches, just a low hum of the engine and the quiet certainty of a system running as intended. Later, I'd be at the helm of a board dinner, discussing cap tables and global expansion. Tomorrow, I'd be back in the lab, optimizing a subroutine that no one else would ever see. That was the point. The value wasn't in the spotlight. It was in the signal. Clear, strong, and unbreakable. I opened my eyes and looked at the city rushing by. The ghost was gone. The architect was home. And the new architecture was finally, beautifully, complete.